Hey, my name is Elliot Moss, and this is my drum processing masterclass. Today, we're going to be doing some really unscientific drum processing. I've got my Akai Mpc 3000, a silly old cassette deck, Ocho Biscuit, and a tape machine, which you can see back there in the top shot. Trust me, there's a tape machine there. We'll get to that in a little while. So the first thing we're going to look at today is running our 808 drum loop here through this cassette deck and the difference between the two sounds. So if I were to just stop this, start it recording, and hit the drum loop in Pro Tools, this is what it sounds like running through the tape machine's electronics, but not actually playing back on its tape. If I now rewind and play this back, we get a really vibey, distorted cassette sound, and the saturation is going to change depending on how hard we send it out this send in Pro Tools. So this send here is what's controlling the feed into the cassette deck.
You could hear the automatic gain circuit in that cassette deck. Like when you first started it, it was searching for signal. It was really noisy. Then the first drum came in and it went, ah, and turned down.
So now I'm going to go back and find the samples. Hit record here. And we're going to capture these back in. This is actually playing back the recording off the cassette. So first we were just hearing it through the electronics. And now we actually heard it back off the cassette. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do with the Mpc Sampler here is I'm going to go into the menus and enable the record monitoring. So now it's listening. If I send it our drum loop, we can listen to what that sounds like through it, and then match the level up. So you hear it have this kind of extended low end thing going on. If you look at the waterfall in Pro Tools, back and forth, that's before, and this is running through the MPC.
Okay, the waterfall is that slow crawling thing at the top right of the screen, right?
Right, yeah, we're seeing a little bit of extra length on the kicks when this is, you can see which one's solo, the process there. And so here, let's record the Mpc Sampler just through, because it sounds pretty cool like that. And the reason I'm doing this the exact same way for each of the sounds is so we can level match them and then directly compare all of the different kick drums through the different processings. And to save time, I've already sampled in 4 of these samples, which are really just the ones we'll be comparing at the end of this video. So I'll just play those in as opposed to running through. And this MPC is really cool. I've used it on a track called Body Into Shapes. That the drums never, ever worked. And then the second I started running the samples through this thing, suddenly they were punched up and made sort of subsonic and exciting. And I'm not quite sure what it does, which I guess is part of its charm. Moving on, this is going to be the most dramatic change to the samples that we hear. This is called the Ocho Biscuit, and it is like a bit crusher, pitch shifter, monstrosity box. So I'm going to plug that guy in. So right now I've got it on low pass. It has pitch shifters and other strange things in it that you can access through the buttons on the front. But I've already kind of made up a patch because this is not a Biscuit video. This is a drum processing video. And it sounds something like this. I can change the clock speed. All right, that's kind of fun. Let's run the samples through that. And so we're hearing this like kind of bizarre analog, like cheap, chippy aliasing going on, while at the same time hearing this kind of beautiful, vast filter tapering off the really harsh digital high end that would be there otherwise. So cool. That's the Biscuit. I could spend all day talking about it, but that's not what this video is. It's about processing drums. So let's move on to the tape machine. I'm going to go ahead and patch that. I'm going to go ahead and arm the tape machine and start it rolling. Cool. So here is what the loop sounds like running through this tape machine. Let's find a cool saturation we like. I've got two markers notated here in Pro Tools, one called Tape Soft and one called Tape Hard, because I feel like it's going to be fun to drive this thing. So I think we could pretty happily call that Tape Soft. What I'm doing here is adjusting the relationship between the input and the output, because if I were to turn the output way down, turn the input way up, I could cause some distortion, and I'd also have to turn up the fader here. Cool. All right, I'm going to record in the samples like that. So that was the soft tape sounds. Now I'm going to go ahead and drive the tape machine and see if we can get some cool distortion happening. Here's the loop once again. Let's see if we can drive it even harder. I'm going to clip my converters. Yeah. And I'm watching this this low red peak, getting it around minus 36 here, because I feel like that's where it was before, so we're not tricking ourselves thinking the distortion sounds better. So I'm going to run these samples as well. Cool. Tape is such a thing. It's really cool. And so our final process is going to be the Gates tube compressors that you can see behind me here. Those are sort of like a Fairchild and sort of not. They can really clamp down on something super hard, and they sound as big as they look, so I think that they're kind of a cool grand finale for our drum processing seminar, masterclass, webinar, whatever you want to call it. Let me go ahead and set that up. The loop sounds like this. These are big, iron, scary monsters that sound as big as they look, and I think it's kind of a cool thing to do last. It's probably going to be loud. I might have to turn it down.
So when you're talking about iron, you're talking about all of the transformers and all of the analog old electronic components that they can't even make anymore because they've got dangerous things in them, right?
Yeah, they're poisonous, so you can't make transformers like this anymore. So here I'm going to run the samples through this as well, and then we will move on to part 2 where we're going to compare everything. Okay, so I'm going to line these up in Pro Tools and then be right back. Okay, so I've got everything here lined up in Pro Tools and somewhat level matched, so we don't trick ourselves into thinking one's better than the other because there's a greater volume. First things first, let's check out the Mpc's electronics on the kick drum. Pretty cool compared to the cassette electronics. All right, well, that's not really. I don't think that I'd use that. How about the tapes electronics? Interesting. So hitting this the tape harder, you got this kind of like high-end transient thing happening. So it's adding a high end as it distorts, which makes sense. You can see, like, watch this bottom graph here. That low end, this red bump, comes around the same time as this yellow stuff. Whereas with the Gates, it's taking longer to go away.
Amazing.
And that's because it's kind of hanging onto that low end. It's clamped down on the signal, and it wants it to be there, and it kind of won't let go. And I think that's probably what's making it sound like it's longer, giving it the illusion of being longer.
So the compression is changing the time of the sample? Is that what we're saying?
It seems like it's giving the illusion of changing the time, I would say. Gates rim shot. That is louder, but we've definitely got more high end with the tube thing, which makes sense. How are the cassettes with this? So that's cool. I would use that. That's just giving it the super lo-fi vibey thing, the biscuit. And honestly, these biscuit samples are very sort of like colorful and fun, and depending on what you're doing, could sit and be much more interesting than something like that. So listen to how much, I think it even goes up in pitch a little bit on the playback off the MPC. So here's the electronics. And then we're going up in pitch. Yep, up the tiniest bit, and you can see it on the graph. Back down. And up. That's very interesting. Something to do with its sample rate not playing back quite at the same as when it was recorded.
Huh.
So this is where I think we're going to hear a really big difference. So that's the playback snare, electronic snare. A little bit higher again, by a quarter tone. The cassette snare drum sounds like a smack in the face. That's actually great. You could do something about the noise, but it's got a serious thwap to it. The biscuit's probably funny. Yeah. Sounds unrecognizable, but it's very useful. Both of those sound pretty similar there, because I don't think they have enough to clip the tape. And the gates it's kind of adding some transient to it, making it a little bit harder. And the last we'll check here is the clap. So here's the gates clap. Tape hard. Oh, it's completely eaten the transient. Listen to that. Here's the gates. And it's gone on tape hard. Tape soft. That's back a little bit. So yeah, driving the tape is ruined. It sort of smashed the transient. Biscuit's just going to be funny. The cassette's probably going to be a little unusable. Oh, ouch. That's pretty cool. You could do something about the 600 and it would feel better. And so here's just the MPC. It looks like I didn't hit a clap, so we'll just do the MPC electronics. That's nice. Sort of takes the low mid out of it. So that might be my favorite with the gates. No, MPC wins there. It's not as extreme as maybe it would have looked like it was going to be at the beginning. We're not driving these things super hard and getting their weird eccentric personalities to saturate. And instead, it's kind of like a gentle way of manipulating and pushing the samples into different time periods without making everything sound out of place. So the final thing that I'm going to do, and we'll cut back to it shortly, is just assemble a drum groove out of these various samples and explain why I went with some over others. Okay, so I've assembled together something that's nothing special rhythmically, but it kind of just showcases a few of the different samples. What I went ahead and did with the hi-hats is used hi-hats from different processes. So we've got the gates, the tape hard, the tape soft, and the biscuit. And that's giving us kind of the same sample through 4 different processing techniques and making it a more complex loop. Ended up using some of the biscuit sounds just to kind of be silly. Here we have the cassette, which has had these cool, really hard toms. The MPC for the snare drum, because it was just nice and puffy. MPC for the kick again too, best kick drum. And an MPC for the cymbal because it kind of makes it less harsh, I feel like.
So there's no one winner.
No, it's kind of just a what are you in the mood for? Different colors. The Gates rim was really cool because it did that sort of like later low end thing to it, and together it's it's not a beat I would use, but this started out as just some digital samples and sounds like a kind of really diverse, interesting drum machine now with sort of a lot of different weird analog stuff going on. I think that's probably something to do with the disparity in the high end. You have these different styles happening. And it, while they're not really that different, I think once it all comes together, you get this cumulative thing where you can hear the sort of like character of each of these devices doing their own special things. We'll run them through the Fairchild plugin from UAD, which is, basically everybody that I know loves and uses this plugin.
And so now there's going to be some movement or some
a little bit of bounce,
but that happens to everything the same way.
Right. And so we can turn up the threshold. And it's just going to kind of tie things together a bit. I'll turn it up too, so you can get a better idea. So the kick is kind of, knocking the high end back as it comes in and goes, giving some buoyancy to the groove. That about covers it. It's a pretty in-depth look at the way that I might go about processing some drums. While these things are not that different, it is sort of a more real-world way that I would go about dressing my drum samples.
And some of the processing was found in the garbage $5 cassette decks. It does not need to be fancy boutique stuff.
It doesn't. It can be anything. It can be toys. Some of the coolest drum sounds I've heard have come out of toys. Ask Damon Albarn, who has got the greatest collection of silly little goofy things that he's turned into one of the most successful bands of all time, Gorillaz. It's not about how much it costs. It's just about how you use it. And with that, I just want to thank everyone for tuning in. I'd love to do more of these, and if anyone has any ideas for what they would like to see, I'd be very happy to go about trying to explain it. My name is Elliot Moss, and this has been my drum processing masterclass.